everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Centrist Post. My name is Lauren Morris, and today we're going to be talking about Russia and Ukraine, one of our main topics here at the Centrist Post. There has been a big event that has happened. Among big events, this one is particularly important to me as I went to Ukraine in 2023 and I drove through and walked through the streets of Bucha, Irpin, and Hostomel. And I've been very concerned about the treatment of POWs by the Russian Federation, the stories of torture. When I was in Ukraine, in Kiev, I met with a group of people called Prisoners' Voice. And they work in conjunction with an NGO called the Center for Civil Liberties, and they work on trying to get prisoners released. Now, most of the prisoners that they try to get released, Prisoners' Voice, that is, they're citizens. So after the siege of Mariupol was happening, the first and second months of the war in Ukraine, there was approximately 1,100 citizens that disappeared in the eastern parts of Donbass and in Mariupol. They were just scooped up off the streets. So think about that, approximately 1,100. And Prisoners' Voice has a database, and they have photographs of a lot of these people, and they're trying to get them released. Well, these people were activists. And do when they are released by the Russian Federation for ever random reason there is, they come back and they're pretty traumatized. The men seem to be particularly traumatized, and they are coming back with significant signs of post-traumatic stress disorder and fingers being removed and things like this. So torture has been and I apologize for my giggle there. I didn't mean to giggle, but I just do that sometimes. So anyway, it was a sad situation to look into the eyes of people, and you see the stress and the trauma that they are suffering. So on January 13th, 2025, and this is on the United Nations Human Rights website, there was a statement by Pablo de Grief, Commissioner of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, to the United Nations Security Council, a RIA formula meeting in New York on the 13th of January, 2025. And I'm going to brief some of this for you right now because I think it's super important. For over 2 mandates, the Commission has highlighted the wide array of violations and corresponding crimes in the framework of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, as well as its devastating impact on victims, their families, and communities. The Commission has reiterated repeatedly its deep concern regarding the widespread and systematic use of torture by the Russian Federation against civilians and prisoners of war. In our October 2024 report to the General Assembly, we concluded that Russian authorities have committed torture as a coordinated state policy and hence crimes against humanity. We reached this conclusion after gathering evidence for over 2.5 years concerning multiple patterns in the way Russian authorities committed the torture in all regions of Ukraine, where they took control of territories, and in detention facilities in the 8 regions of the Russian Federation. We found that different services and security forces of the Russian Federation have acted in a coordinated manner and according to a division of labor in the commission of torture in well-established detention facilities. Regular personnel of the Federal Penitentiary Service, known as the FSIN, and its special purpose units known as Spetsnaz, impose routine, harsh practices designed to scare, break, humiliate, coerce, and punish detainees. A violent, quote, admission procedure, close quote, is intended to terrify detainees upon their arrival through recurrent beatings and on various parts of their bodies. Intrusive body searches, a prohibition for sitting, sleep deprivation, stress positions, forced physical exercise, prolonged nudity were some of the most routine practices of which they have evidence. Compliance with imposed rules is monitored through surveillance cameras, and severe collective punishment is imposed for any behavior perceived as a breach. These practices have been transposed from detention facilities in the Russian Federation to those that come under the authority in the occupied areas of Ukraine. Multiple testimonies from former detainees demonstrated that the leadership of detention facilities or other high-ranking Russian authorities have ordered, encouraged, tolerated, or taken no action to stop such treatment. 3 former members of the FSIN, who we managed to interview after they left their service, referred to guidance by hierarchic superiors as to how Ukrainian prisoners should be treated. 2 of them recounted commanders who instructed personnel, quote, to work harshly and with no pity on Ukrainian detainees. A third such interlocutor stated that the regional head of the medical unit directed doctors not to forget that the prisoners are enemies. Interrogations aimed at extracting information or eliciting false confessions are generally led by personnel of the FSB, and that is the Federal Security Service. It's known as the FSB. And in the presence of the personnel of the FSIN and the Spetsnaz. We documented some of the most violent treatment during interrogations, including severe and repeated beatings, sessions of electric shocks with wires attached to various parts of the bodies, at times in combination with water to amplify the effects of the electricity, burns, and suffocation. Some categories of persons were targeted in particular during interrogations, and those were the citizens accused of collaborating with Ukrainian armed forces or authorities, prisoners of war from Mariupol or Western Ukraine, officers, and those not fluent in Russian. Another disturbing element is the recurrent use of sexual violence as a form of torture in detention facilities held by the Russian authorities. Detainees are subjected to long periods of forced nudity, intrusive body searches, and attacks on genital organs through beatings and electric shocks with tasers, including in the showers when they are naked and wet. We also documented individual acts of rape and attempted rape, electric shocks using wires and burns to the genitals, castration, and sexual mutilation. Male former detainees reported intentional attacks on their reproductive organs. For instance, a perpetrator told a former detainee, "I will beat everything out of you so you cannot make children." Others shared similar experiences. Medical care is generally denied in detention facilities, even in situations where detainees had serious, visible, and life-threatening injuries. Sometimes this led to death or severe or irreversible medical complications. After the blast that occurred in July 2022 in the well-known Olenivka colony, the blast which dozens of Ukrainian soldiers were killed, Russian authorities did not provide necessary medical assistance to the severely injured soldiers. Basic aid was provided by fellow co-detainees, while the leadership of the colony stood and watched as Ukrainian prisoners of war died from serious injuries. In some cases, the medical personnel in the detention facilities were even involved in committing the negligent or abusive acts against the detainees in breach of their ethical standards. The denial of medical care demonstrates a further disregard by the Russian authorities for the dignity and rights of the detainees. Former prisoners described severe physical and psychological consequences that they have had to endure after recurrent torture, often with long-term complications, including disability. Many still suffer from pain and trauma from broken bones and broken teeth, bleeding, swelling, and infected or gangrened body parts, breathing difficulties, walking and sleeping difficulties, poor eyesight, and damage to various organs. Some of the victims underwent or still undergoing complex medical interventions. A former detainee told the commission, "No creature alive deserves to be treated the way the Russians treat the Ukrainians in their detention facilities." Post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety and attempted suicide are common side effects, which also accompany memory loss, difficulties in communicating, and alcoholism. Victims conveyed their constant fear of being detained again and being subjected to the same ordeal. Many of the victims found their reintegration into social and even family life to be particularly challenging. Their situation has led to additional displacement, family separations, losses of jobs, and livelihoods. So, this was from the commissioner of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine to the United Nations Security Council meeting here in New York. Now, the reason that I wanted to talk about this so much is because just in my particular circle of people, there are people who on the conservative right, and this is not it should not be a shock to anyone, but we have found people who are just simply on what I refer to as the wrong side of the war. And they have been swayed by the Russian propaganda and they believe it. And I have noticed that there's also, in combination with this, a real lack of empathy towards anything that the Ukrainian people are suffering. And we saw this play out as a perfect example when President Zelensky did his interview with Lex Fridman. And no matter what Zelensky would say about they're bombing us every night, they're killing us, they're ripping our children from our arms, they're killing us. You know, we have people that have lost arms and legs and lost a lot more. You could see Lex just kind of sit there and just kind of go, yeah, but can't you forgive them anyway? Can't you forgive Putin? I mean, there is a real lack of being able to connect the dots here with who is the bad guy. And this is what we need to understand. Who the bad guy is. Who invaded Ukraine? Russia. It was an unprovoked, aggressive action. And this conclusion has been remarked upon and spoken about ad nauseum since the first year of the war. We're entering our third year now. And members of the European Union and the leadership of various countries have had almost countless meetings now, dozens of meetings. They've gotten together and they've made resolutions and they've signed documents and treaties and agreement, all denouncing what the Russians have done to Ukraine. So torture is like that declaration from the commissioner to the UN Council. He said, I'm going to repeat, he said that it was systematic and it was coordinated among various departments. And I've heard this before. The system of torture comes from the highest levels, and that would be Putin. So some of the methods of torture also include dog attacks, mock executions, but I keep seeing prolonged stress positions coming up, and sexual violence. Um, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Alice Jill Edwards, expressed alarm at evidence indicating that Russian military forces in Ukraine are consistently and intentionally inflicting severe physical and psychological pain on the POWs. The consistency and methods of the alleged torture suggest a level of coordination, planning, and organization, as well as direct authorization, deliberate policy, or official tolerance from superior authorities. In March of 2024, the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine reported a sharp rise in the credible allegations of executions on captured Ukrainian POWs and recorded at least 32 such executions in 12 separate incidents between December 2023 and February 2024. The widespread use of torture against Ukrainian POWs constitutes a clear violation of international humanitarian law and human rights obligations. Torture is considered a war crime, and its systematic or widespread practice can amount to a crime against humanity. The UN Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine has expressed concern over the continuing patterns of violations. So, wasn't it interesting when the UN still allowed Russia to have a seat at the table on security issues, and they're still shaking hands with Putin, some of them. So it's very scary, and it's very interesting, the people who look the other way and who just disregard what's happening to the Ukrainian people. The other thing that has been interesting to me is that in America, where we live freely, um, the people who are condemning Ukraine would be the same people who may fight to the death if this were happening to us in our country. If there were boots on the ground in the United States, Russian boots or China boots or North Korean boots in the United States, kidnapping our people and torturing and enslaving our people, how would these people react to that now? Would they think that it's crimes against humanity and war crimes, or would they just look the other way and go, well, that happened to my neighbor, it didn't happen to me exactly? And would they criticize the neighbor who is the victim? I mean, don't we see this in Islamic law, where we see Islamic women who are forced to wear the head covering from head to toe, and they get raped, and then they get stoned to death for being raped? Isn't it kind of the same thing? You are condemning the victim. You're condemning the victim. So that's what we're seeing here. And so this is a good thing to bring up to your friends and your family members. And my recommendation is that you don't hold back. Why soft boil it and say, well, we won't tell you, what the things that they're doing, to torture the Ukrainian POWs, but they're torturing them, So I think it's a good thing to care about, that Russia has been operating with impunity, and they have been operating sabotage operations, and they have invaded other countries like Chechnya and Georgia. They annexed Crimea and they've invaded Ukraine, and they say that they're going to go after Finland and Poland. There's really nowhere that's off the map for Russia. So as the war has gone on, from the invasion till now, we are seeing stronger and stronger language coming out of NATO and coming out of the UN. It's taken a while for it to get there, but we are seeing stronger and stronger language about what is right and what is wrong. It's wrong to invade another country. It's wrong to torture prisoners. It's wrong to kidnap children. It's wrong to bomb innocent civilians every single night. And I submit that it's equally as wrong to look the other way and to allow it to happen. And to also say that we don't, that's not our war, that's not our our problem. We saw Putin bomb Aleppo in Syria. And while this was happening, we really didn't hear about it that much on the news. We didn't really hear anything at all in the news about the Wagner Group and what they were doing and what have been doing for years in Africa. Now we hear reports coming out from the UN that Russia is behind the mass migration of Africans into the European Union for the purposes of destabilization. And the crime in the UK is out of control. It's out of control from the migrants and from cultures that just will never be cohesive together. So anyway, that's going to be it for me for this. Um, I am very glad to see these reports coming out. And uh, let's hope, and I hope for a victory for Ukraine, not a concession of territory to the aggressor, because it will allow, and this is an obvious, is so obvious, this statement right here is so obvious. If we give territory to Putin, we appease Putin, we think that we can make a deal with Putin, or we try to contain Putin, it's not going to work. He's going to come back after he has regrouped, and he'll come back harder and stronger. And we see that those ducks are already lining up. We see Putin engaging more and making agreements and treaties and doing whatnot with Iran, strengthening the partnerships in that region. So the last thing that I want to say about this is that think about an entire country of people where you literally have all hands on deck involved in the war effort, and your men are coming back, and they have incredible post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, prior to the war, Ukraine did not have, according to my knowledge, and I did research it and looked it up, and they may have had something like it, but I don't think they did at all. And that would be a veterans um, administration like we have here in the United States. So when I was in Kyiv, I asked this question, do you have a veterans administration? And the people at Prisoners' Voice and the Center for Civil Liberties said, no, we don't. And that when these people are coming back from being prisoners and they have been released, and it's documented that they've been released. At the time, this was in 2023, Ukraine had about 3 months of some kind of social services, and that wasn't really described to me what all that they had, what was available to them, and what all that they had. But anyway, you are going to have a nation of some severely damaged people, like it is from any war. They're never going to recover from this. So my purpose in doing this video today is to talk to anybody who has an issue with supporting Putin. And this is what you are supporting. And this is what you can tell people who either don't care about Ukraine or don't want us over there, is that this is what you are supporting. And you're supporting the bombing of their citizens, the kidnapping of their children, the torture and rape. And it really is a cultural genocide. So this is Lauren Morris with the Centrist Post signing out. Today is Friday, January 17th, 2025. We have a new president moving into the White House, and he's going to be taking office on Monday. And what I hope is that he will deliver Putin a, a substantial blow economically and materially and in every way that he can to knock him off of the world stage and put him back in his place so that he will never, ever again threaten another country.